Hey, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis Vlog. Let's talk about phobias, specifically phobias, or I should say phobicking, and the psychological illusion model. I'd like to share two very recent case stories with you to illustrate how these two people were helped using the psychological illusion model. So the first case is a few days ago in Denmark. I was doing a psychological illusion model seminar at the Danish National Guild of Hypnotists Congress. And a woman there had a lifelong phobia of walking in the woods. She'd never been able to do it. And one thing that came up for her spontaneously when talking about it was having once almost been killed, strangled by her ex-husband. We'll just call him Steve for the purpose of this. So when she thought about going into the woods, this idea of being assaulted, strangled, hurt, killed appeared. So I had her imagine it, and she responded with a 10 out of 10 in intensity in the seminar room. Now consider that. She's not in the woods, she's in the seminar room. So that's the first hint that she's not really experiencing being in the woods, she's experiencing a thought, right? So that's what I'm always looking to get people to see. Now, I had her imagine being in the woods and being strangled and being hurt and killed and all these sorts of things. And she had a tremendous emotional response. But then by using some very pointed questions, such as, are you experiencing being in the woods? Or are you experiencing a thought labeled being in the woods? Or are you experiencing being strangled by Steve? Or are you experiencing a thought labeled Steve and a thought labeled strangled by Steve? She started to realize that she was experiencing a thought labeled Steve, and a thought labeled I'm being strangled, and a thought labeled being in the woods, which is not the same as being strangled. So the fear around that vanished. And I also helped her to realize that the character I in the thought mirror, meaning when she was imagining this, the character I that was being strangled by the character labeled Steve, that character labeled I is in and of itself a thought, and that she never shared the destiny of the character labeled I in any thought mirror, meaning the character I that was being strangled during her imagination, no matter what happened to that character, she was completely fine. And once she saw that, the whole thing evaporated, the whole thing dissolved. Um, she said, you know, this isn't me. It's not even happening to me. It's not even happening. And the next day she sent me an SMS that she had walked for 45 minutes in the woods alone, had a slight nervousness, but really enjoyed it, really liberating. So there's this old story in Buddhist circles about this guy, this monk who walks in the desert and suddenly he sees a snake and he freaks out, you know, heart beating, sweaty palms, dry mouth, catastrophic thoughts. But then he suddenly takes a look at the snake and he realizes that it's a rope. And once he really sees that it's a rope, the whole fear response dissolves. Not as a result of trying to relax, but as a result of seeing, really seeing that the threat that he thought was there was not actually there. This is what I mean by, you know, all phobias or acts of phobicking, it's a process, are like that. It's a bit like thinking we experience a snake while really experiencing a rope. So when I use the words illusion, I don't mean non-existent. I mean something that doesn't survive inquiry. So something that appears a particular way, but when you really explore it, you get the chance to discover that what you think you experience is not actually at all what you experience. And that's the essence of the psychological illusion model. The other really great feedback I got yesterday from a client is a guy I worked with for close to a year ago who wanted to be a firefighter, but who was claustrophobicing very intensely and could not have the suit on with the gear and do these tests where you are in very, very enclosed spaces. He'd completely freak out. He wouldn't even be able to do the tests, much less complete them or do them well. Now, in the office, when I had him imagine things, he wasn't really able to connect to anything physiologically. And it didn't really have that felt sense, and that can be a challenging client. So I asked him to describe what he experienced, meaning what the term claustrophobia was actually referring to in terms of experience. And we landed on pulsation, sweatiness, dryness, some contractions, some shaking. So I had him run on the spot, really, really intense. And then I had him really go into his experience and describe in minute detail what it was that he actually experienced. And he had this kaboom moment of suddenly realizing that what he experienced while running on the spot was pretty much the exact same physiological activity that he experienced under the label of claustrophobia. Only the story of what it meant to feel those things and the story of where it looked as if that experience was coming from was different. And in that, he realized that the sensations in and of themselves were completely neutral. And that dissolved his fear. It was like an instantaneous shift. He suddenly realized that the physiology, because people often think that they're afraid of the feeling, but they're not really, not once they've deeply explored it. He realized that the physiology was neutral. So these are two. So when he called me, he had passed his tests to be a firefighter. Only one test remained, but that had nothing to do with this particular context. And he had passed them with flying colors, like no nervousness, no issue whatsoever. So these are two examples about how phobias work. You know, you're not really experiencing the plane trip or being in the woods. You're experiencing a thought labeled plane trip. And your thoughts, for the most part, are comprised of what you could call mental images and self-talk and body sensations and emotions. And when we fear or experience, we have a tendency to interpret aspects of our experience as if there's a snake there. But there's really not. So all I really do with clients is that I help them to discover that they don't have to be afraid of their own experience. All they're really afraid of is their own experience. And they're afraid because they haven't deeply explored it. So the threat that you think is there is not actually there, but you have to explore a little bit sometimes to really see that. And sometimes people need to explore it quite a few times to really see it. So anyways, I hope this was useful. I'm doing a seminar this weekend, September 25th and 26th, 2021, on the psychological illusion model. If you're interested, go to either ayetherandalchemy.net. It's hosted by Pete Dalton in Birmingham. This is an online seminar, or you can find the link on the seminar page on provocativehypnosis.com. Know that I see clients from all over the spinning planet on Skype. If you'd like to work with me, you can reach me at provocativehypnosis.com. Or if you're looking for seminars or mentoring or anything like that, you can find me at provocativehypnosis.com. Hope this was inspiring and useful. Notice that in these cases, there is no imposition of a all-powerful, all-knowing unconscious mind. There is no coddling with an inner child or negotiating with these so-called bratty alleged parts of the unconscious. There is no special state of hypnosis being alleged. There's no concept of a mental illness to treat or exposure therapy. There's just this idea that your experience is illusory, and that by exploring it, you can discover something about it that helps dissolve the fear. All right, till next time. Thanks for listening.